In the heart of Mzimbaland, a small but lively town where the smell of roasted plantains and simmering spices filled the streets, stood Baba Juma's Delight, a modest restaurant with a reputation that stretched far beyond the town's borders. The people of Mzimbaland were used to good food, but nothing compared to the dishes that came out of Baba Juma's kitchen. The moment someone took a bite of his meals, their eyes would widen with surprise, their lips smacking as they savored the taste. It was said that even the grumpiest elders found themselves smiling after eating his food. Some customers whispered that the dishes held a kind of magic, as if each spoonful could make a person forget their worries for a while. Others swore that the food had healing properties. It soothed aching joints, calmed restless minds, and even brought joy to those weighed down by sadness. People traveled from nearby villages just to have a taste, and word spread quickly. Customers lined up before the restaurant even opened, eager to experience whatever enchantment Baba Juma infused into his meals. He became the most respected chef in Mzimbaland, but no one, not even his closest friends, knew the true reason why his food tasted so divine. The secret ingredient was Zahra. Zahra was Baba Juma's only daughter, a 15-year-old girl with the longest, most beautiful hair in the entire town. It cascaded down her back like a river of silk, dark as the night sky, thick and lustrous. Women envied it, men admired it, and little girls dreamed of having hair like hers. But Zahra didn't think much of it. To her, it was just hair, something to comb, wash, and tie up when she worked around the house. But Baba Juma knew better. He had discovered her hair's secret power by accident many years ago. One evening, as Zahra sat at the dinner table braiding her hair, a strand fell onto the plate of stew Baba Juma was preparing. He absent-mindedly mixed it into the dish, unaware of what had happened. Later that night, when he took his first bite, a warm sensation spread through his chest, and the flavors exploded in his mouth like never before. It was the best food he had ever tasted. Curious, he tried it again the next day, this time intentionally adding a single strand of Zahra's hair into the pot of soup. When he tasted it, the same thing happened. The spices blended perfectly, the meat became more tender, and the aroma was richer than anything he had ever cooked before. That was the day Baba Juma's cooking changed forever. From that moment on, he carefully collected strands of Zahra's fallen hair and secretly added them to his dishes. He never told her, never told anyone. It was his greatest secret, one that transformed his struggling restaurant into the most famous eatery in town. And Zahra? She had no idea that the thing she cared about the least, her hair, was the very thing that had turned her father into a legend. But secrets, no matter how well kept, always find a way to be uncovered. And Baba Juma's secret was no exception. Baba Juma's restaurant continued to thrive, drawing in more customers than ever before. He had expanded his menu, introducing new dishes that quickly became town favorites: spicy, creamy peanut soup, coconut rice, and the softest, most flavorful flatbreads anyone had ever tasted. The more he cooked, the more he perfected his craft, all while secretly adding strands of Zahra's hair into the meals. He had become so careful that he collected the hair only when she brushed it, making sure to take just a few strands at a time so she wouldn't notice. He kept them hidden in a small wooden box in his kitchen, pulling out a strand whenever he prepared a new dish. But Baba Juma wasn't the only one noticing the changes. Zahra had started feeling different. At first, it was small things. She would wake up feeling strangely exhausted, even after a full night's sleep. Her scalp tingled sometimes, as though something was being pulled from her, but when she looked in the mirror, her hair remained thick and full. Then came the hunger. No matter how much she ate, it never seemed to be enough. She would finish a plate of rice and beans, only to feel hungry again within the hour. Even when she snuck extra pieces of sweet plantains or helped herself to the leftovers in the kitchen, the emptiness in her stomach never faded. One day, as she stood in front of the mirror brushing her hair, she noticed something odd. A single strand of her hair had turned pale, not completely white, but lighter than the rest. She plucked it out, staring at it in confusion. "What is this?" she mumbled to herself. Her hair had never changed color before, and yet, here it was, one strand, almost golden in the light of the sun. She shrugged it off, thinking it was just a random change, and tossed it aside. But later that evening, she found another, and another. It wasn't just her hunger that was growing, it was the feeling that something wasn't right. One afternoon, while Zara was sweeping the kitchen, she noticed her father standing over the stove, preparing the evening meal. The rich aroma of fish stew filled the air, making her stomach growl. But as she watched him, something made her pause. Baba Juma was holding something in his hands, something small and dark, almost invisible against his fingers. He carefully dropped it into the bubbling pot and stirred quickly before anyone could notice. Zara's heart skipped a beat. She knew that motion. She had seen him add spices, salt, and herbs to his dishes many times before. But this was different. She didn't say anything, not yet, but she paid close attention from that moment on, watching her father carefully, waiting for a chance to uncover whatever secret he was hiding. That night, as the restaurant filled with the laughter and chatter of satisfied customers, Zara sat quietly in a corner, her thoughts racing. What had her father put in the food? Why was she always so hungry? And why was her beautiful, thick hair, starting to change? She didn't know it yet, but she was about to find out. And the truth would change everything. Zara could no longer ignore the strange feeling in her bones. Something was wrong, and every instinct in her body told her it had something to do with her father's cooking. For days, she watched Baba Juma closely, pretending to be busy while secretly observing his every move. She saw how he always reached into the small wooden box before stirring his pots. She noticed how he looked around before quickly adding something unseen to the food, his hands moving with practiced secrecy. Then there was the hair. It wasn't just the strands turning lighter. Her hair was falling out more than usual. Every morning when she combed it, more strands clung to the teeth of the comb. Every time she braided it, she found loose strands on her shoulders. She had always been proud of her thick, strong hair, but now it felt thinner, weaker. She had to know the truth. The midnight plan. One night, after Baba Juma had gone to bed and the restaurant was closed, Zahra tiptoed into the kitchen. The air was still thick with the scent of spices and grilled meat, but her focus was on one thing: the small wooden box. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside, neatly coiled like tiny threads of silk, were strands of her own hair. Dozens of them. Zahra's breath caught in her throat. Why? Why would her father keep her hair in a box? She stared at it for a long time before closing the lid and backing away. Her heart pounded in her chest as she turned to the cooking pots. If her hair was in that box, was it possible that... Her hands shook as she lifted the lid off the largest pot, one her father had used earlier that day. The stew inside had thickened, a layer of oil shimmering on top, but Zara wasn't looking at the stew. She was searching for something else. She grabbed a spoon and stirred, her stomach twisting in knots. Then she saw it. A single strand of hair, floating in the rich brown liquid. Her hair. Zahra dropped the spoon, stepping back as a wave of nausea hit her. She felt like the walls of the kitchen were closing in on her. The memories flashed through her mind. The strange taste of the food, the way customers always craved more, the hunger that never left her body, the strands of her hair turning pale. It all made sense now. Her father had been feeding people her hair. Confronting Baba Juma. The next morning, Zahra barely spoke as she set the tables in the restaurant. She could hear the customers outside, eager for another day of Baba Juma's famous meals. But inside, Zara was boiling with questions. As soon as her father stepped into the kitchen, she turned to face him. "Baba," she said, her voice firm, "what are you putting in the food?" Baba Juma froze, his eyes darting to her. "What do you mean?" Zara took a deep breath, her fingers curling into fists. "I saw the box. I saw my hair in the stew." For a long moment, Baba Juma said nothing. His face was unreadable, but Zara could see the gears turning in his mind. He was trying to decide what to say. Finally, he sighed and sat down on a wooden stool, rubbing his forehead. "You were never supposed to find out," he said quietly. Zara's stomach twisted. "So it's true? You've been putting my hair in the food?" Baba Juma nodded. "It started as an accident," he admitted. "Years ago, one of your hairs fell into a pot, and I didn't notice until later. But when I tasted the food, it was different, better. People couldn't stop talking about it. I didn't understand it at first, but I knew it was something special." Zara's breath hitched. You used me, my hair, without telling me." Baba Juma looked down, shame flickering in his eyes. "I only took what fell from your head naturally," he said. "I never hurt you. I never meant to." "You never meant to?" Zara's voice rose. "Baba, my hair is changing. It's falling out. I'm always hungry. Don't you see what this is doing to me?" Baba Juma's face fell. He hadn't realized. Zara took a shaky step forward. "I don't know what's in my hair that makes your food taste better, but it's not normal, and I won't let you keep doing this." For the first time, Baba Juma looked truly afraid. Not of losing his restaurant, not of losing his customers, but of losing Zara. The truth was out now, and there was no going back. The silence between Baba Juma and Zara stretched thick like heavy smoke. The walls of the kitchen, once filled with the warmth of sizzling onions and bubbling soups, now felt cold, as if the heart of Baba Juma's delight had been ripped out. Zara stood stiff, her hands trembling at her sides. She had imagined all kinds of secrets her father might be hiding, maybe a rare spice, maybe a cooking technique passed down from ancestors, but never this, never something that involved her. Her father had been stealing from her, not money, not objects, but something far deeper, something she didn't even know she was giving. Baba Juma sighed heavily, running a hand over his bald head. "Zara," he said, his voice low and heavy, "you don't understand. This restaurant, it was dying. People had stopped coming. I was losing everything. And then your hair changed everything." Zara clenched her jaw. "So you took it? Without asking me? Do you know what I've been feeling? The hunger, the exhaustion, my hair turning lighter?" Baba Juma's eyes widened. "Your hair is changing?" Zara exhaled sharply and stepped forward, grabbing a fistful of her thick locks and pulling it over her shoulder. She pointed to the strands streaked with gold. "Does this look normal to you?" she demanded. Baba Juma stared, his face darkening. I didn't know this was happening." Zara swallowed the lump in her throat. "Because you never thought to ask." Her father closed his eyes briefly, guilt settling over his features. "I only ever took the fallen strands," he whispered. "I never cut your hair. I never meant to harm you." Zahra let out a bitter laugh. "So that makes it okay? Baba, I feel like something is being drained out of me. Every day I feel weaker, and you've been feeding me my own hair without me knowing." Baba Juma rubbed his face. He looked older now, more tired than ever before. "You don't understand, Zara. If I stop, if the food loses its taste, the restaurant—" Zara slammed her hand against the wooden counter, her eyes burning. "Forget the restaurant. What about me?" Her father opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, Baba Juma saw his daughter not as the girl who had grown up helping him in the kitchen, not as the child he had raised, but as the person he had betrayed. The taste begins to change, The argument between them ended in silence, but the damage had already been done. That day, Baba Juma cooked without adding Zara's hair to the food. He forced himself to resist, pushing away the wooden box as if it contained poison. The customers noticed the difference immediately. People murmured as they ate, their expressions shifting from joy to confusion. A woman picked at her stew, tilting her head. "Something is missing," she said. A man at the next table took a sip of his soup and frowned. "It's good," he admitted, "but not the same." By the next afternoon, the crowd outside Baba Juma's Delight was smaller. By the evening, it was smaller still. Zara sat in the back of the kitchen, arms wrapped around her knees, listening to the quiet. She knew this was coming. She knew people had come for the magic in the food, not for the man who cooked it. Her father stood at the front of the restaurant, staring at the empty tables. The light in his eyes was gone. But Zara felt something else. Relief. She was finally free. Or so she thought. A desperate choice. Late that night, when Zara had gone to bed, Baba Juma sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the wooden box. His hands trembled as he reached for it. He had never seen the restaurant so empty before. He had built this place with his own hands, poured his soul into every dish. Without the magic of Zara's hair, would people ever come back? Would he lose everything? His fingers brushed against the strands of hair inside the box. No one had to know. Just one last time. Just enough to bring the customers back. He took a deep breath, reached for the cooking pot, and stopped. His hands shook violently as he clenched his fists. The guilt in his chest was suffocating. The image of Zara's hurt expression burned in his mind. Slowly, painfully, he closed the box. Baba Juma knew what he had to do. Tomorrow he would tell Zara everything. Tomorrow he would make things right. But tomorrow might be too late. Morning arrived with an unsettling stillness. Baba Juma's Delight, once filled with the sound of sizzling oil and bubbling broths, was silent. The usual crowd outside the restaurant was gone. The town had moved on, searching for new places to eat, new flavors to satisfy their cravings. Baba Juma sat at the wooden counter, staring at his calloused hands. They had made magic once. They had fed an entire town, turned his little restaurant into something great. But at what cost? Zara entered the kitchen, her arms crossed. She hadn't spoken to her father since the night before. "I stopped," Baba Juma said without looking up. His voice was hoarse, as if the weight of his guilt had settled deep in his throat. Zara hesitated, then sat across from him. "I know." He sighed, rubbing his face. "The customers are leaving." "I know that too," Zara said softly. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Baba Juma turned to her, his eyes heavy with regret. "I want to fix this, Zara, but I don't know how." Zara looked down at her hands. She had spent days feeling betrayed, days wondering if her own father had cared more about his success than her well-being. But now, looking at him, she saw a man lost in his own mistakes. She took a deep breath. "You need to tell the truth." Baba Juma stiffened. "Zara!" "No more lies, Baba. If you really want to fix this, you have to tell people what you did. You have to stop hiding." Baba Juma swallowed hard. His hands trembled. The thought of standing in front of the people of Mzimbaland and admitting what he had done was terrifying. But he knew Zara was right. If he wanted to be free of this guilt, if he wanted to rebuild his restaurant the right way, he had to come clean. That afternoon, Baba Juma stood outside his restaurant, facing a small crowd of curious onlookers. The rumors had already begun. People whispered about the sudden change in the food, about the decline of Baba Juma's Delight. With Zara by his side, Baba Juma cleared his throat and spoke. "I have a confession to make," he said, his voice steady but firm. For years, my food tasted different because of something I never told anyone. It wasn't a special spice. It wasn't a family secret. The people murmured in confusion. Baba Juma took a deep breath. It was my daughter's hair. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some people looked horrified, others confused. I never meant to hurt anyone, Baba Juma continued, but I let my greed blind me. I used something I didn't understand, something that belonged to Zahra. And now I have stopped. The food will not taste the same, but it will be honest. And if you no longer wish to eat here, I understand. The silence that followed felt heavier than a storm cloud. People exchanged glances, whispering amongst themselves. Then, slowly, a woman stepped forward. It was Mama Asha, an old regular. I always knew there was something special about your food, she said. But I also know you've fed this town for years. You made meals for the sick, for the poor, for those who had nothing. That's what I'll remember. Another voice called out. You made a mistake, Baba Juma, but at least you're not hiding anymore. Baba Juma's throat tightened. He had expected anger, shame, rejection. But instead, the people of Mazimbaland gave him something else, a second chance. The road ahead was difficult. Many customers never returned, unwilling to forget what they had learned. But others stayed, willing to support Baba Juma as he rebuilt from the ground up. The food was different now, less magical, less addictive. But it was real. And with time, Baba Juma learned to perfect new recipes, ones that didn't rely on stolen magic. Zara, too, began to heal. Her hair slowly returned to its natural state, the streaks of gold fading away. The hunger that had plagued her for so long disappeared, replaced by strength she hadn't felt in years. And more than anything, she and her father had something they had almost lost: trust. One evening, as they closed the restaurant together, Baba Juma turned to Zara with a small smile. Thank you, my daughter. For what? She asked, raising an eyebrow. For saving me from myself. Zara chuckled, shaking her head. Just promise me one thing, Baba. What is it? No more secret ingredients. Baba Juma laughed, a real genuine laugh, and for the first time in years, Baba Juma's delight felt whole again.